So here's something interesting. South Africa's governing African National Congress has lost its parliamentary majority for the first time since the end of apartheid in 1994. But what does this mean for Africa's $400 billion economic powerhouse and the continent's most industrialized nation? Well, I'm going to get into that, and we're going to look at three things in particular. Why the ANC lost, how Jacob Zuma yet again showed his tactical prowess through the MK party, and lastly, coalitions and what they could mean for South Africa. After 3 decades in power, the ANC, a once respected liberation organization deeply ingrained in South African hearts, has come to be associated with corruption and poor governance. On Wednesday, the 29th of May, it was penalized for these things by the voters in South Africa in our 7th general election. The people had clearly had enough. Although 27 million people registered to vote, only 58% turned up to actually make their mark, which was an 8% drop from the 2019 general elections, which came in at 66% turnout. While the end of apartheid gave every South African the right to vote and other basic freedoms, the challenge for the ANC was to convert that into a better life for all, especially for us, the black majority. Some have described the ANC's majority 3-decade tenure as a game of two halves. For the first 15 years, or the first half, the country grew across most metrics and life got generally better for most. But from 2009, promises started to become broken. The next 15 years was marked by poor governance, corruption, and a lack of growth and high unemployment, as well as a lack of economic opportunities. Look, the task for the ANC since 1994 was never going to be easy, considering where we come from. But along the way, they achieved a lot, this must be said. But clearly how they conducted themselves in the second half, for most of the time, became a sticking point to voters who started to see the effects of gross mismanagement of the state, its resources and mandates given to it by the people. Things stopped working and infrastructure started to suffer and crumble. Lack of action on key issues also frustrated people who started to want change. South Africa continues to rank amongst the most unequal countries in the world. It has one of the highest unemployment rates, and it also has a high rate of pervasive poverty that still disproportionately impacts abantu abamnyama, black people. The ANC had this cross to bear for the longest time. But it wasn't always this bad. The ANC reached its electoral peak in 2004 when it won 70% of the vote. But after that, it lost support at around 3 to 4% in each election since then, consistently until this last one. To put it simply, the 2024 general election for the ANC was a bloodbath. In this election, the collapse in its vote was massive. It registered a drop of 16.8%, which translated into 3.8 million votes less, more votes than what the official opposition was able to attain. The ANC was basically its own worst enemy here. But more especially, it was defeated by Jacob Zuma's MK party, a party formed mostly from a Zulu-speaking faction of the ANC itself. Now, a side note here, Zulu people are the largest ethnic group and nation in South Africa, with an estimated 13.5 million people who live predominantly in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. This is important. Zulu people formed the base of ANC voters, and at times they had the most branches. Thus, keeping this base happy was a big part of how the ANC stayed in power for so long. Well, this was until the ANC discarded one of KwaZulu-Natal's most prominent sons and former political figure, well, not former anymore, President Jacob Zuma. As two cadres of the ANC liberation movement, Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa knew each other very well. In fact, Cyril Ramaphosa had been in line to be president of South Africa since the late 90s. But Thabo Mbeki got the nod ahead of him and Cyril was sent to business exile by Mandela's ANC so that he would not stand in the way of Thabo Mbeki's leadership. It was kind of like a two bulls in one kraal thing. But don't worry, Cyril got very wealthy for taking that L. But when Jacob Zuma got elected in 2009, the opportunity for Cyril Ramaphosa to come back into politics opened up at around December 2012. He was recalled by Zuma's ANC and he became the deputy president of South Africa. Basically, he was next in line to take over after Zuma. He also was the one who expelled Julius Malema out of the ANC, a person who went on to form the EFF, now South Africa's fourth largest party. Well, actually they were third and they were expected to grow until this past election, where Zuma's MK took third spot and also some supporters from the EFF. From 2011 until the 2017 ANC elective conference, South Africa saw a lot of government scandals, with Jacob Zuma at the helm. The most prominent was the state capture scandal. If you're not up to speed on that, simply Google and watch on YouTube or read up on it. It's a lot. Billions of rands siphoned from the state, 3 Indian-born brothers living large in South Africa, capturing and corrupting key state institutions and figures. And there's also leaked emails and billionaires backing journalists to leak said emails. Maybe one of these days I'll make a video about that particular period in South African history. So with all of this weighing heavily on the ANC, in 2017, Cyril Ramaphosa won the ANC's top job at the party's elective conference. This win was against Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who was backed by the Zuma faction of the ANC. See, Zuma had done his 2 terms in government and couldn't technically stand to become president. So he gathered a few radical economic transformation loyalists and also tried to win the seat of power through others. He lost. Cyril won, and a wave of ANC supporter optimism swept through South Africa. And there was finally some hope that South Africa would start moving in the right direction for a change. By February 2018, Zuma was forced completely out of government as president and also sent to exile by the ANC under mounting pressure from internal and external role players who no longer wanted 2 centers of power or the possibility of the ANC losing 2019 through voter backlash. Look, the Zuma versus Cyril story is very layered and goes on and on and on. But what you need to know and can research is how Zuma was pinned by state capture allegations, and he was sentenced to 15 months in prison for contempt after he defied a court order to appear before an inquiry looking into the corruption during his 9-year presidency. But many saw this as a turning point and even an unnecessary act. Some saw it as Cyril Ramaphosa flexing his muscles, maybe a little too much. Zuma supporters felt he had gone too far. Riots broke out under the guise of supporters feeling that Zuma was hard done by. These riots took place in KZN and parts of Gauteng, South Africa's richest region. To be clear, people looted and burned shops and clinics and other buildings. These were razed to the ground in the name of Zuma. President Ramaphosa released Zuma after he had served only 3 months of his sentence. This was clearly an attempt to placate him and his angry supporters, but I think it was a little too late. Also, he found that a lot of Zuma's cabinet ministers had a part to play by doing a go slow during the riots and not acting promptly to stop them. But truth be told, this is likely to be Cyril's biggest issue. He would rue his decisions, those taken to kick out Zuma and kick him while he was down. This titanic battle at the top compounded people's feelings about the ANC and its infighting, and also confused many around its organizational renewal message, which was its way of saying it would and will change. It felt like a little too late. The ANC further declined under Cyril Ramaphosa. He too had his own scandals coming from Pala Pala mattress dollars and CR17 bank statements. These scandals took a toll on his businessman image and also painted him in a not so clean brush to the public. Confidence in his abilities dropped, policy decisions were slow, things just weren't working, and load shedding and COVID responses didn't paint his government in glory. Even the media that so loved him deserted him. The end felt near. On the 16th of December 2023, the MK party was launched in Soweto, Gauteng. It was at this event that Jacob Zuma returned to the political front lines by announcing his association with MKP. He would go on to have a tussle over the leadership of the organization, but he would win that battle and many others surrounding the party, its legitimacy, its intellectual property, and other things. In fact, Zuma only declared in December that he was joining MKP because he was unable to cast his ballot for the ANC of Ramaphosa. Under the banner of the new party, Zuma revived a once sleepy name within the ANC lexicon, Umkhonto Wesizwe, the spear of the nation. The political battle was well and truly on. The story of the forming of MK is a story on its own, but we have to keep this one going. This is about the election. The election results released by South Africa's Electoral Authority, the IEC, suggest that the ANC mainly bled support to the MK across three key provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and Gauteng. With 45.93% of the vote in KwaZulu-Natal and 1.6 million votes to its name, MK will take control of KwaZulu-Natal province, South Africa's third most important province and a massive contributor to the country's GDP. They're going to need a coalition to see this through. Now in Mpumalanga, the ANC admitted that they took MK for granted and they were proven wrong. MK took 17% of the ANC support in the province with 199,000 votes. A stunning, unexpected move. And in Gauteng, where many didn't give MK a chance due to the province being hotly contested by everybody, MK gathered 410,000 votes to register 10.54% in the province. This support was directly attributed to MK taking ANC support and also some support from the EFF. Since its founding, MKP has had a profound impact on the South African political landscape, surpassing what many thought was possible from a new party. Nothing like this has ever happened in South African politics since the end of apartheid. Not even breakaway party COPE was able to do this, as they only managed 1.3 million votes and a 7.42% share of vote. MKP registered 14.5% support and 2.2 plus million votes in their first election. Now, in addition to undermining ANC support across key regions, MKP also took a large voter base from the more radical economic freedom fighters, the EFF, which up until now had been South Africa's third largest party and was set to grow, but they didn't because of the addition of MKP. While a conviction stops President Zuma from being elected into parliament as a leader of MKP, he will now be a significant player in the negotiations to form new coalitions across government. And he also will drive the direction of the South African political landscape for at least the next 5 years, as much as he possibly can. From the exploits of the MKP in this last election, we can definitively say that Jacob Zuma is a serious political operator. That much can't be denied. Also, for those wondering in South Africa, if you are convicted and you serve your sentence and wait 5 years after that, you're still allowed to be an MP. So who knows? Maybe we might see Zuma in parliament again. Maybe even at the ripe young age of 87. Okay, we're almost there. We need to now talk quickly about how the coalitions amongst the parties could play out. Now, with no outright majority winner in these past elections in South Africa, parties will have to join up and vote together to get a majority and form a government. See, coalition governments have existed in South Africa at local levels since 2016, but this has never happened at the highest level. And the makeup of an ANC coalition government is now the biggest question on everyone's lips. The forming of coalitions will in itself come with challenges, as parties have different views on different issues. But take it with a pinch of salt that ANC, MK, and the EFF are all founded under the banner and policies of the ANC. Okay, let's get into what might happen. There are 4 hotly spoken about coalition possibilities: the ANC and the DA, the ANC, the EFF, and the Patriotic Alliance, the ANC and the MK, the DA, the MK, the EFF, the PA, and the IFP. So let's look into each one of these. Let's start with the ANC and the DA. The ANC could align with the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, a center-right party largely led and supported by the white minority here in South Africa. See, this is possible because the DA is the official opposition, and they got this through a 21.8% share of the vote. And with the ANC's 40.17%, they could easily govern. The policy differences are, however, a sticking point, especially on BEE, transformation, NSFAS, and international policy, Palestine, the economy, and even the role of government. Do you see where I'm going with this? This would be a coalition of complete opposites. Also, it's unlikely to happen because there are still 2 factions in the ANC. There's one led by President Ramaphosa, which is much more concerned with the state of the economy and quite likely to look at the Democratic Alliance as a good enough partner. And on the other side, this move could alienate many in the ANC's other faction who would consider this a red line. And also, let's think about the voter base who might also feel betrayed. It would be hard to spin this, even though it does make some sense from a point of business and investor stability. This is if core issues could be sorted out. But where would that leave the policies meant to uplift black people? Now let's look at the ANC, the EFF, and PA as a possible coalition. This is quite possible. The policy differences exist, but they're quite small and can easily be reconciled between the parties. This would be a coalition between a party that has 40% and the others have 9.49% and 2.4% respectively. The differences between them are quite stark. So issues could arise in this marriage. This obviously would cause some tension. The leaders of the parties have a good working relationship generally and have worked together at local government municipalities. But the EFF has proven to be quite an erratic coalition partner, and the ANC's internal politics might also pose a risk to this marriage. Gayton and the PA haven't really been a thorn to work with on other issues, but with this added mandate from his supporters, who knows what could happen. The advantage of this coalition is that it is mixing experience in government with the vibrancy of youth, new ideas, and also it includes the often marginalized colored voting contingent. The possible challenge with this is that the EFF has historically been seen as being an unstable coalition partner. Because nani nyamazi moso Julius. If he wakes up in a bad mood, he calls a press conference and who knows what happens next. But to his credit, he was much more measured in his post-election address. Also, the open borders thing could be an issue between EFF and the Patriotic Alliance. The EFF likes open borders, the Patriotic Alliance wants closed borders. Also, investors might not like this grouping, and economic growth is likely to be similar to what it is now. Well, that's what the experts say. But maybe if Floyd gets finance minister, who knows? The ANC and the MK. Now, this coalition would be very interesting. It would most certainly be more likely to be a personality-based arrangement. There are no policy differences since the MK really doesn't have much of a policy outlook, nor have they fleshed this out properly to the base. And also, it's born from the ribs of the ANC. The leader of the MK party, Jacob Zuma, is far more experienced and is still, at the time of this recording, a senior leader in the ANC, but he has another party. I know how this could be confusing. There is a historical tension between the factions that were once under the ANC's banner. Those wounds and feelings can't be mended without sacrifices. It's likely that Zuma will make the demand that everybody knows and is thinking. He'll make the demand that Cyril must resign, and the ANC would have to deal with either having one or many partners to form a government. And that choice would be made easier because Cyril Ramaphosa would have lost an election. It's a possible coalition. The stability of it is uncertain though, but if it does happen, it will be a dangerous and, frankly speaking, a paranoid environment. Also, it could be more of the same. Do we want that? I don't know. The DA, the MK, EFF, the Patriotic Alliance, and the IFP. It's a possible coalition. Because most of South Africa isn't too happy with the ANC, there's one more coalition that we have to speak about. That doesn't include the ANC, but it still could happen. Remember, the ANC doesn't have an outright majority. And those other parties, when combined, can create a coalition through their majority if they band together. This would be the most unstable coalition, with too many variables, too many different leaders, and parties to even accommodate. There would be no clear policy coherence. There would be no ideological common ground. There'd be a lot of things missing. But this is what a majority of South African people want. I mean, 60% of people voted against the ANC. They're tired of the ANC. This is also a likely coalition since opposition parties wouldn't waste a chance to take the ANC from power for the first time, despite there being a potential for dire consequences. I don't know how this actually plays out. This is all just speculation. We have 2 weeks to find out, so I guess we should all buckle up because we're in for a wild ride. From a dominant position when it once commanded 70% of the vote, the ANC has seen people gradually desert it, especially amongst a newer generation of South African voters who don't remember nor associate with apartheid as much as the older generation did. Due to its failures to keep promises, mismanagement, corruption, load shedding, infighting, and constant own goals, the ANC finds itself without a majority for the first time. People said no. They said no on the 29th of May. The election will from now on be seen as a landmark moment for the country's post-apartheid democracy, as the ANC's support for the first time dropped below 50%. Even though the ANC, with its 40%, is still the biggest party in South Africa, the drop below 50 has led to it now having to govern alongside other people and parties. It now has to be more accountable. But what is scary for many is that coalition governments have not worked as smoothly at local government. This is the biggest political shift in South Africa since the ANC ascended to government in 1994. We need to all get it into our heads. This is a big deal. This is also the most humbling moment for a party that Zuma himself once said would rule until Jesus comes back. Well, many seem to feel that maybe Jacob Zuma might have been the Jesus figure that he even alluded to. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching up until this point. Also, please feel free to watch any of the other videos from this channel, and we hope to see you again soon. Cheers.